Good. Good afternoon. It's good to be back. A lot of stuff happening in my office today. But good day and welcome to the Servant Leader Speaks. I don't have rights to that music. That's Ricardo Clark, the Bahamian Ricardo Clark. Very good. That song. Whatever happens in your life, you're going to have to make a move, decide what you're going to do. Let's enjoy this for a moment. Good evening, good afternoon. Let's just get started. We're talking about making a move, making a decision about what you're going to do. As we get started, we're going to talk about one or two stories that's in the news today, and then we're going to talk about some questions in regards to what was asked on our last show on Monday about what has happened in the last 52 years. And so we will be ready to go in just a moment. Let's just whisper a word of prayer so that we can get focused and we can get started. Father, in the mighty name of Jesus, we give you thanks for what you're doing. We ask that you would be with us in this day. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. So let's just get started. Welcome to the Servant Leader Speak. I'm McIntosh, the servant leader of the Bahamas Constitution Party. Thank you for joining me today. Kendrio Edgecombe, Ken KCX is supposed to join us just a little later. He's been calling, but we are going to have to just hold him for a few minutes before we actually get in the conversation. We are going to need him to come on live, actually on the broadcast, rather than just calling. So I'm just saying that so if he's listening, he can go ahead and give us a few minutes and call on the broadcast. But let's talk just a few minutes about what's happening in the news, and then we're going to kind of answer some questions about what's happened in the last 52 years, whether we've made any progress, and where we are. Of course, KCX is coming later in the broadcast when we're going to talk about the WTO and the EPA, and that is an important part of what we should be thinking about over the next few weeks and months in the nation. So thank you so much for joining me. Those of you who want to make any comments can do so on the Facebook, on my page, or on the broadcast, or you can send it on WhatsApp on 4232709. So we want to get started with what's in the news today. What have you been hearing? I have been hearing matters in the news that has been interesting. The Prime Minister being insulted or feeling insulted by what was said by the President or the CEO of Liberty, which is the company that has taken over BTC, and they're concerned. They're very much concerned about that. And we're just trying to get it online again. As I said, it's been very busy in the office today. But the PM being insulted about that. And so we asked you, what do you think? I mean, I listened to the matter on Facebook, not Facebook, on the link that was sent. I understand them speaking in regards to the Prime Minister wanting more people, Bahamians, to be employed, but the company belongs to the Bahamian people in conjunction with Liberty, and Liberty now is the second company from who purchased it at the beginning. So the Prime Minister is insulted. Do you think based on listening to the link, whether it warranted an apology. Well, the PM is saying that the man did call and apologize and on the telephone, so he's accepting that as such. I listened to it. It did not say very much, except that, it appears that we are offended when people talk about us. But we can talk about each other any kind of way. So we have a problem when people talk about us. Even though we are supposed to and want to be excellent in regards to everything we do, we realize that we are no longer, to a great degree, following the values in the Constitution, in the preamble, saying how we should conduct ourselves with self-discipline, with industry, with loyalty, with unity, and abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. I think even though things like integrity and honesty is not in those is listed, those are implied. That if we treat each other with respect, if we treat each other with fairness, if we think about how we operate, we will always be considerate as to how we deal with people. Now, seeing that everybody's up in arms about the Prime Minister and what Mr. Nair said about the Prime Minister, or referred or inferred about the Prime Minister, if you have something to say on that, just send me a text on WhatsApp, 423-2709. Send a text and I will talk about it. My next story really is the Abaco port. That's a very interesting thing. Abaco is close to my heart. Yesterday, I saw a few comments out of Abaco, very concerned about the port situation. The major port in Abaco, in Marsh Harbor, is run by the government. Several days ago, it failed inspection. Today will be another inspection. And Roscoe Thompson, he is the town chairman for Marsh Harbor and Spring Point. He's very concerned about that. He's pointing fingers at the Minister of Transport, Renwood Wells, the MP, Darren Henfield, and James Aubrey, who is, I think, the secretary, the parliamentary secretary in the Prime Minister's office in Abaco. Now, if Abaco Port actually stops operating, it will be a travesty for Abaco and the people of Abaco. No shipping coming in, no boats coming in. Obviously, the port can't close, but how could this come about? How in the world does the government of the Bahamas, who's responsible for this port, actually allow the port to come to a place of disrepute that it cannot pass an inspection? That is a concern. That is a very big concern for the people of Abaco. That is a concern that the government of the Bahamas will allow Abaco Port to actually come to a place where it did not fail. It did not pass its inspection. That's my big concern today. I know we always like to be Nassau-centric, but Abaco has an issue, and the government of the Bahamas is responsible to making sure that port is correct and fixed. And all the infringes on the inspection should be fixed. And so now we're just putting our plug in there so that the government of the Bahamas would do what it has to do, that the people of Abaco will not be frightened by what is happening, which is if that port is closed. I'm sure the government won't let it happen, but if it fails inspection, it means there is a problem, a very big problem for the boats, the ships that comes from the United States, come from Nassau going into that port. And so that's my concern. If whoever is responsible, we would like to encourage them to go ahead and do what has to be done. And also that speaks to the fact that we are not good when it comes to maintenance in this country. Every government seems to not know how to maintain things. It should not be. I mean, we're running a government. This is a country. Can't we get it together when it comes to maintaining? So I do believe that we actually need to really pull up our socks as a nation. I think on the other show on Monday, there were several complaints, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit, about what we've done in 52 years, where we've come, what we've accomplished. But I know one thing that we seem to not be able to accomplish is to find a way to make sure that we are maintaining things and we don't have to rebuild them again. So let's talk just a little bit about that and go ahead and speak to the issues about going forward in the nation. Now, before we go, there's one more story I'm thinking about. And this is not the main story. This is the story of the post office that did not happen. I think Scott Godet is talking about the issue of him having a partnership, a public-private partnership with the government of the Bahamas. And he made that agreement with the Christie administration in regards to his building on Independence Drive. Now it is that Mr. Goddard is thinking about suing the government of the Bahamas for somewhere in the vicinity of $17 million. Wow. I am sure because this government, which is the Minnis administration, had determined to go with Brent Simonet and go with the Town Center Mall instead of going with the agreements that was made with Mr. Scott Goddard for the post office. And then we talk about, or we heard about Phil's building. That was also recommended to be the post office. And now none of them was successfully negotiated to become the post office. Instead, the government went with Mr. Brent Simonet, the Town Center Mall. This whole matter is conflict of interest, breach of the Constitution. These are issues, when we look at how we should govern the country, is paramount. That what kind of values are we using in order to do what has to be done? I don't want to get in a rampage in regards to these matters, but I do think that it speaks to what I have spoken to for 21 years, which is the preamble of the Constitution, which indicates that the values of self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and abiding respect for Christian values are values in which we should use to govern the country, should use to do our business. We should consider other people in regards to making agreements. We can't make an agreement with somebody, signed a paper, and then turn around. We do not carry through. Well, even with my dealing with the government of the Bahamas, it is interesting because they never want to send you a piece of paper. They never want to send you a letter. They don't want to make a commitment, I guess, unless they decide not to. But if they do make a commitment, the commitment should be upheld. And so Mr. Scott Godet desired to sue the government of the Bahamas. I guess we're looking at that. We'll continue to look at that because that is a matter that has to be taken into whether he has a case or not. But let's go into some of the matters of what have we done as a nation. In our show on Monday, my friend KCX, who is going to come on live as soon as he gets around to it, but I want him to give us a couple of minutes so we can talk about where we are as a nation and where do we go. His question, and he may not have understood my dialogue on the other day, and probably he did, but he had an issue with it. But I had determined in the discussion on Monday that the purpose of coming to independence, and we were talking with Sir Lyndon, and what it is, those persons who were involved with independence, involved with the Constitutional Committee to get independence for the Bahamas, the only thing they could have negotiated was internal self-governance. And I put some reason to that on Monday, was the fact that we had majority of the persons in the country who had a 10th grade education, a 9th grade education, because that is what happens when you come out of school at 14. A 9th grade education is as much as you have if you come out of school at the age of 14. The fact that we had persons who were bellmans and maids and taxi drivers, persons who may not have had an education for us to pursue a nation without executive control or executive management by Her Majesty. Now that we have come 46 years later, we have educated the population, we have put in place the College of the Bahamas, now University of the Bahamas. We have in place, and let me get my list of the amount of things that I think has been accomplished in the last 46 years. We have primary schools. Prior to 1967 and 1973, other than the churches, whether the Methodist, the Catholic, the SDA, the Baptist, other than their schools, we had very few schools in the country. We have a Southern Senior and Southern Junior. They were part of schools, and that is as far as you went. Very few people were selected to go on to government high school. And so prior to independence, that's what happened. But coming out of majority rule and independence, Sir Lyndon Pindling and the government at the time set out to build primary schools, junior schools, senior schools. So in the last 46 years, we have 26 primary schools, probably more throughout the other islands. We have 8 junior schools in New Providence, 7 high schools in New Providence. We have more than 5 or 6 preschools in New Providence. We have the Technical Cadet Corps program, Center for the Deaf, Center for the Blind, Center for the Mentally Retarded, BTBI, we talked about COB and the University of Bahamas. So we have actually done a lot in terms of educating the people of the Bahamas. I'm talking about this because I've had conversations over the last several days in which people attempted to diminish the work that has been done by Sir Lyndon and the PLP earlier. Now everybody know I'm not a PLP, I'm the leader of the Bahamas Constitution Party. But during those years, they have done what they could have done up to a certain point. What I am excited about is the fact that as many scholarships, as many in-service awards for tertiary level education was given out in order to educate the Bahamian people. These were seeds that were planted so that now in 2019, we actually have a country that can consider moving away from constitutional monarchy to constitutional democracy. So that generation was not able to do it. It is our work. And the amount of things that has happened over the last 52 years really was seeds planted into the future. We cannot diminish the work that has been done because we thought it should have been done. If we, as I were, 7 years old when we became independent, I was unable to contribute anything to nation building. But now, at the age of 53, obviously I have much more to contribute. The fact that in the last 52 years, 46 of independence, that we have come a long way. The financial institutions has been created, central bank has been expanded. We have we have Bahamas Air, we have the Mortgage Corporation, we have ZNS turning to the Broadcasting Corporation. All of these are seeds planted towards the growth of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We had the creation of the middle class. We have the Bahamas built as a sports power. We have tourism. We have sent ambassadors all across the world to countries, to organizations like the United Nations, the UK, the Diplomatic Corps has been created, to organizations like UNESCO and the Pan-American Organization, the Organization of American States. All of these are things that has happened. What my concern has been is that, and I'm continuing from the program on Monday, that the purpose of Sir Lyndon Pindling and those who worked at the time created or decided to push for independence for several reasons. The several reasons were to produce a Christian nation. They pushed for it so we could determine our own destiny. We were able to now chart our course as a people and to develop not only the country, but the Bahamian people, and not just physically, but socially, financially, culturally, and spiritually. They wanted to produce a nation so that we as a people, we can determine what we want to see become of our nation. I wish to thank all of these McIntosh people that has come online to tread, Kurt and Michael and a lot of them. It just seems like they're there. I don't know them specifically, but thank you so much for joining me, family. What does a Christian nation supposed to look like? I thought I'd repeat it because I talked about it in another show. What should it look like? You know what? If you don't know the purpose of a thing, you will always abuse it. So the fact that a lot of people, and they're saying it even now, that they don't think we are a Christian nation. It is the preamble of the Constitution that has obligated us as a Christian nation. And the majority rule is so that the aspirations of the majority of the people should come forward. You know, one thing that people don't understand, and I'm glad for being able now to talk about it and that people would understand, is that when we came from majority rule, from a colony to majority rule, it was to accomplish a couple of things. And though that fight for majority rule, something was accomplished in that fight for majority rule that a lot of people take for granted. It was women's suffrage and universal suffrage, because universal suffrage is one man, one vote. Prior to 1962, only men with property was allowed to vote, and if they had 500 companies, they were allowed to vote 500 times. Sir Lyndon said it was an iniquitous situation because of the fact that if one man with 500 companies can vote 500 times and a man that has no company cannot vote, that those were iniquitous situations that needed to be brought to the fore and to be changed. When we became independent, we got our own national anthem. We all know that. It told us a story of the aspirations of the Bahamian people, that the world will now see a new people. Mark the manner of our bearing. We continue to say that because that is a very important part of how the people should see or would see the new Bahamas. The pledge, our allegiance to the nation, to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and not just to the colonializers, to the monarchy. Our flag, united in love and unity. This is very important when we were establishing a new nation. You know what we're talking about? What have we accomplished in the last 46 years? So we became a new nation so that we can identify a new people called the Bahamas and to establish a righteous nation. Now, I am going to read just for a few seconds or moments what it's supposed to look like. What is a righteous nation supposed to look like? What is a Christian nation supposed to look like? We are supposed to operate in the fear of God. That's a primary thing. Those people who lead, those people who organize the nation is to operate in the fear of God. We're also supposed to operate in a just and fair manner. Persons responsible for justice, persons responsible is to operate in a just and fair manner. And that is also why the founders put in the preamble of the Constitution an abiding respect for the rule of law, that everyone has equality under the law. We are to be our brother's keeper. We are to treat the poor with respect and dignity. We are to respect our elders. We are to respect people's right and space. Well, to a great degree, that has gone out of the door in this country. But we are saying it because it has to come back if we are going to reconstruct and benefit this nation. We are to develop the nation and make wealth common. Everyone should have the opportunity to eat, to prosper, and to be able to live in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. We ought to deal swiftly with wrongdoing. That is something we seem not to do in this country. We have cases waiting for 5 and 6 years before it comes about. We have to alleviate poverty and injustice. We are to be industrious people with all diligence to develop programs as we lead to feed ourselves, to end hunger in the nation. The government must use the natural resources to help all the people, not a selected few, and then righteousness and judgment must run down like water on a mighty stream. That is important. It is important. Sometimes people are concerned when you talk about righteousness, they get all excited, they get fearful. What are we talking about when we talk about righteousness? It is about doing the right thing. Justice and fair play for all. It is about doing it the right reason for the right people. It is about spreading opportunities for all. It is about protecting the nation, the sovereignty, the heritage of the nation. I know that in a letter in 1956, Sir Lyndon Pindling and Sir Randall Fox wrote to the persons they were inviting to vote for them, which is in the Southern District of New Providence. What they said in the letter was talking about what I've always talked about, righteous governance. And they said, I've just one clause of it, the cause for which we fight is the cause of righteous governance. That was their word. The cause for which we fight is the cause of righteous government. They believe it was necessary that these things come about in the nation because the Bahamian people, they wanted more from the nation than what they had. Now, when we get to post-1998, we tell a different story. Because in 1998, and the time since the end of the PLP rule by Sir Lyndon Pindling, the beginning of the rule of the country by Hubert Ingram and the F&M, that we see a nation that has turned the corner. And we're not just talking about wealth, because wealth is good, prosperity is good. In 1992, the F&M won the government. Hubert Ingram was the leader of the country for 2 terms. And during that term, government in the sunshine was able to do a lot of things that they did not see come about during the age or the leadership of Sir Lyndon Pindling. During that time, we looked to make sure those things, prosperity would come. But certain things came and happened in the nation that began to change the values in the nation, the value system of the nation. And for those of you who knows about it, would know that it began to change the value system in the nation. I remember speaking to Sir Lyndon Pindling in 1998. What he said to me was that the PLP failed to accomplish what they intended by producing a Christian nation, that they did not achieve what it is they intended to do, and that the F&M was taking the nation further into a liberal, secular stance. Clearly, if he said a liberal, secular stance, that he was concerned that what it is they intended to do was more conservative than what the F&M was now doing. So both governments of PLP and F&M failed to accomplish the founders' intent. This is not just about politics, you know. This is about accomplishing what the founders intended for the nation. I want to say in that time, after 1998, in which my perspective began to come into play, what have we done and what are we doing from that point to now in order to take the nation in the place where we need it? Now, I know on Monday when we spoke, KCX was a little offended by what I said, but I'm prepared to stand by what I say in that we had a generation in Sir Lyndon and those persons who did what they could do 46 years later, 52 years later after majority rule and 46 after independence. We are the generation that has to take the nation to the next level. We don't expect what happened then can still be as valid now. The only thing that is valid is this Constitution that says to us, until you change it, then you must go with it. It is my intent, and those who work with me, and one of our perspective is, of course, there is a need for constitutional changes. But the people did not change the Constitution in the 2 instances that we had referendum on the basis that they did not trust the government. At this point, 46 years after independence, the Bahamian people has to see a government that is prepared to do the right thing, make the right changes by this constitution, not just one or two issues, but all the issues that make certain that we as a nation is going in the right direction for the development into the future. Now let me just make note of several things that I believe went wrong since 1997 and 1998. I will use that point as my perspective. Number one, because, as I said before, Sir Lyndon indicated, both the PLP and the FNM is going against the founders' intent. This wasn't about politics. This is about the founders' intent for a new nation. Both the PLP and the FNM was involved in the constitutional talks, and so they made a decision to put in this constitution the preamble which indicates the spirit of the law of which they would do. Several things went wrong. The second thing, we were signing on to conventions that would not enhance the development of the country regarding the founders' intent. So the first thing, we were going against the founders' intent by neglecting the preamble of the Constitution. The second thing, we were signing conventions that would not enhance our development regarding that intent. The third thing, foreign direct investment had come in and was coming in at the detriment of the ownership of Bahamian businesses. That's my third point of public policy that is seeking not only to enslave us now, but take us back into colonialism. The fourth point, we began to borrow money from everywhere. Everyone who would lend us money, we were borrowing money, and we was mismanaging the resources. Because at this point, and I would say it, that when Sir Lyndon left office, the debt to GDP was 21%, about 21%. At this point, the debt to GDP is close to 70%. The debt to GDP does not speak of an amount. I think we might have been around $1 billion in regards to at 21%. But at this point, we had $8.8 billion in debt. The PLP has asked us to sign on to value-added tax so that the debt would be reduced. The FNM government has determined to add to that to 12% in order for us to decrease the debt and the deficit. Neither has come about. I think another thing we failed to do is feed ourselves. We've not developed the farming and fishery at a rate that we can slow down and stop to a great degree the importation of food into the country. Now, you know why that becomes a problem? That becomes a problem because a lot of substandard food is now being distributed throughout the world. GMOs, vegetables and fruits that are grown by GMOs and animal husbandry that is being fed steroids. So if we feed ourselves, if we produce those level of industry to feed ourselves, we would not have to concern ourselves by the high level of cancer that is now being in the country because we have been determined to import rather than grow our own vegetables and our own husbandry. The second issue in the nation is to distribute wealth among the whole people, among all of the people. That we should nationalize the natural resources in order to produce a sovereign wealth fund so that all the people of the Bahamas can benefit. Another thing that we have failed is we've allowed the economics to remain in the hands of the few. Imports, shipping, banking. The ports are being taken over by the same people. All of the ports in the country is being run by the same set of people. So we are happy about what happened. As I indicated and itemized, a lot of things that has happened good in the country because since independence, since internal self-governance. But the things, we are now turned the corner, and what I'm identifying now is things that are taking us back to colonialism because we have now of all the good things that have happened, we have now caused these things to now be reverted to make a bad impact on us. Let's look at creating multiple streams of income for the nation. Clearly, we do not have that. Clearly, we have only one stream of income for the nation, and it's called value-added tax. It's called taxation. Some are fees, others are, most are taxes. So whether we're going to have import duties or value-added tax, if these are the only way that we can raise money in the country to a great degree, we are failing in terms of the economy. There's a lot more can be done with venture capitalism, partnering with Bahamians to create industry in the country. We must find another way. What we have done is we have created a great deal of indebtedness to foreign elements, which is causing us a great deal of problem as we look at our debt to GDP, and whether we are going to be able to reduce the debt of the nation so that we can be a little less intense. When people pay more taxes, they are uncomfortable because they can't buy food in some instances. When taxes are increased or government is running a country based only on taxes, only on increasing taxes in order to bring more revenue, it puts pressure on people. It causes stress and pressure. Sometimes companies have to close down because they can't absorb the level of taxation. That is what is happening. And so we have caused such a level of indebtedness to foreign elements, including the Chinese. You know, that's concern to me. Because on every corner in the country, Carmichael Road, Blue Hill Road, East Street, there are Chinese businesses doing wholesale and retail. I see Kendall is here, and so in a few minutes I am going to bring him up so that we can talk about how do we make the change and the turn in terms of going to the next level. Now you must remember that we're talking about not going back to colonialism. And Kendall has been talking about the EPA and what it is that will happen should we go in that direction. Look at me. I'm trying to get him on. I'm telling you at this stage, but I pray that he can get on so that we can talk about this. So talk about the WTO, because I'm talking about the things that are we've failed in and the things that are just in the wrong direction regards to indebtedness and trying to find out. I think it's coming on, and so we're trying to find out how can we as a people make a decision. We heard Ricardo Clark. We're gonna have to make a move, and the move is you have to do what you've not done before. Done.